Welcome back to .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And we're in Sydney, Australia at NDC Sydney Developer Conference.
Here in the Hilton.
In the Hilton.
And the boat cruise is tonight.
Yeah, so every year the NDC people take the speakers on a boat cruise.
Well, some of the attendees come along too.
Yeah.
It's a mixed bag. We'll have some fun with it.
They've always done it in Oslo,
Yep.
and they did it in London.
Yeah.
And
down
here we go.
the River Thames.
River Thames. I'm really looking forward to it.
It'll be fun.
Patricia Aas is here, and we're going to be talking to her about all things awesome pretty soon. See what I did there?
Nice.
Awesome.
Awesome.
And but before we do that, let's do this little segment we call Better Know Framework.
Awesome. All right, dude, what do you got?
So what do we learn?
Yeah.
No music when we do this.
Yeah.
Ever. They put it in afterwards.
Yeah.
So.
Little podcast magic.
Right.
If that's what you want to call it.
Yeah. Today, Richard, I'm talking about nativescript-view.org. You know NativeScript.
Yeah, that's the Telerik technology.
Yeah, Telerik started.
Right.
It's basically a way to build native apps with just JavaScript. And you can use TypeScript. And now NativeScript View is the combination of both of those things. But the reason I bring it up is, the technology is cool enough. Mm-hmm. But the playground.
Oh.
The playground is awesome. So we're going to put a link to the playground, but if you just go to our Better Know Framework link, so this is show 1586, so it's 1586.pwop.me, that'll take you to the playground. A playground tutorial. Like it's a real app. It's not just website.
Is it just living in the browser? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is becoming very hip, having coding environments right in the browser.
Yeah. And so you get all of that TypeScript, NativeScript, Vue goodness right there. Mm-hmm. And it's just very cool.
That is neat.
Yeah.
That's fun.
That's it. That's what I got. So check it out. Know it, learn it, love it. Who's talking to us, Mr. Campbell?
Grab the comment off show 1512, the one we did back in January of this year, 2018, with James Whitaker. We were talking about storytelling. And I know we're going to talk about code today.
Yeah.
And I think every piece of code tells a story.
Yeah, of course.
And James was awesome, right?
It could be a bad story.
I'm not saying, I'm going to qualify, man. It tells a story.
It's a story.
It may be a story of sorrow.
It may be a story of broken dreams.
It might be.
Sorry.
I've seen that code. But here's a comment. This is from a few months ago. This is Ewan McCrarian, who said, I'm listening to this podcast and it brought to mind the advice I give to those who ask me to write, or at least help write, their CVs, usually my extended family. I tell them that a CV has to tell a simple and coherent story about who they are and how they've progressed in their work life, ideally as a vague approximation of the truth, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
The initial quick scan of CVs by employers weeds out any CV that can't be grasped quickly, and it's important to get past this hurdle. I can't argue with that. I learned this from my own hiring experience when I was putting together a team of pirates off the Barbary Coast to go off pillaging frigates. We needed a range of different pirates, from inexperienced juniors to full deck brigands, and I was shocked at the poor state of some of the CVs I received. There were those that seemed to feel that their certificate in advanced peasantry somehow qualified them as cutthroats. There were others that demonstrated no interest in staying current in the latest nautical plundering technology. But those CVs that told a simple, straightforward story of their life of maritime crime, ideally written in the blood of their enemies, at least got an interview. We're going on a boot cruise later on today, right?
I'm not so sure I want to go now.
Ewan. You got me to laugh, man.
Yeah, that's
great story. So a copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or via any of our social media, because we publish every show to Facebook and Google+. And if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. He's at Rich Campbell. I'm at Carl Franklin. Send us a tweet. They make good plot lines. Because maybe they don't. I don't know. I don't know. Let me formally introduce Patricia. Patricia Aas is a programmer who's worked mostly in C++ and Java. She spent her career continuously delivering from the same code base to a large user base. She has worked on 2 browsers, Opera and Vivaldi.
My goodness.
Wait a minute. Didn't Vivaldi write Opera? So there's
it's a lot. It's a lot of the same people that started Vivaldi. Yeah. So a lot of ex-Opera people.
So where's Verdi? That's the next version. I always liked Giuseppe Verdi, which translates to Joe Green.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Also, she works as a Java consultant and on embedded telepresence endpoints for Cisco. She's focused on the maintainability and flexibility of software architecture and how to extend it to provide cutting-edge user experiences. Patricia's focus on the end user has led her work more and more toward privacy and security, and she's recently started her own company, TurtleSec, hoping to contribute positively to the InfoSec and C++ communities. She's also involved in the Include C++ organization, hoping to improve diversity and inclusion in the C++ community. Well, welcome, Patricia.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you.
You don't think about the security side of C++ code very often.
Oh.
You know, we do it in the .NET space all the time, because we do a lot of front-facing and so forth, but I don't know, I can't imagine securing C++ is easy at all.
No, it's not. And the thing is that if you look at security issues in C and C++, they're generally more like classical native exploits kind of things.
Sure.
Whereas if you talk more about high-level or front-end languages, you're generally talking about SQL injection or or not securing transport of data.
Yeah, exploits of the framework rather than exploits of the code.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting comparison. So.
Yeah, I imagine also, having code that's binary, right on the metal is a lot easier to hack than, any kind of bytecode or IL.
The funny thing is that what we're seeing is that most of the vulnerabilities that are exposed in normal applications is more logic errors, not actually code errors. Mostly things like the OWASP 10, which is like regular SQL injection and things like that are the most common actually.
It seems like we're never going to knock SQL injection off the top of that list.
No.
It makes me crazy.
Yeah.
It's always there. You've got a great talk here about reading other people's code. Is that in the context of security, that evaluating code from an InfoSec perspective?
Yeah, in many ways. I would like to learn different kinds of frameworks, but also it comes from working in large code bases, two browsers, and also with the embedded product, I was playing around a lot with Android. And when I play around with Android, I'm not making, I also did that. I made Android apps, but I'm basically making an Android device, right? So you're dealing with the entirety of Android, and the Linux kernel. And then you had so you have code bases that are quite old or that have a lot of history and are quite large. So trying to understand somebody else's code becomes a big part of your job.
I think it's very normal to be reading code of people that are no longer present.
Yes.
And probably haven't been for ages.
Yes.
So there's nobody to ask. You've got to read it.
And let's face it, comments don't really help, do they?
No, sometimes they can be illuminating. Usually if it's more like high level stuff, like this thing is supposed to do this thing in this way, more like just descriptive of its function.
Right.
But when it is per line, generally the code changes very often and you'll leave things behind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's easy to get very cynical and harsh about reading other people's code, especially when they're not present.
Yeah.
Especially if you're Linus Torvalds.
He wrote an epic email.
We mentioned it on the show just recently.
Yeah.
That's what it was. I mean, he was reading people's code that they were checking in, and he didn't like it, and he would ream them for it. Yeah.
And we've had a culture in tech where that has been an acceptable form of treating other human beings.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's healthy, not for us as people, and I don't think it's good for the things that we make either.
Yeah. Agree.
Having spent many years as a consultant, I came to appreciate that for some people who are consultants, consultant actually is the synthesis of con game and insult. Your main thing you do is you show up and let everybody know that everything you've done is terrible. I'm here now, we're going to fix it.
Right.
It's an awful way to work.
Yeah.
But there is an energy, maybe it's almost this academic energy of I am the smartest person in the room. And if you can't understand that, then that's a failing of yours rather than mine. Which again, I fundamentally disagree with. But it's remarkably pervasive.
Yes. And I think we think that is how smart people behave.
Yeah.
But when you think back to the smartest, most fascinatingly creative people you've met in your entire career, they're usually really humble
And very gentle.
and good teachers.
Anders Halsberg.
Yeah.
One of the kindest, gentlest people I've ever met.
Yeah.
And just staggeringly brilliant.
Yeah.
And he would never throw it in your face, but he has a way of answering a question that you've asked that conveys to you, I have thought deeply about this for a long time, and I know the next 3 questions you're going to ask.
Yeah.
And you learn.
And you do.
So in my experience, the most brilliant people are actually very kind and very patient, and they think your questions are interesting and worth answering.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And so those that are these sort of, because I don't want to question Linus Torvalds' brilliance. Although,
No.
I mean, some of it's got to be right place at right time. He has stuck to his guns. There's something about persisting in this challenging space of building an operating system, Carl.
Yeah, he's smart. He's just Mr. Cranky Pants.
Yeah.
I think very often when you read some of his more epic answers,
I love how dignified you are about this, Patricia. That is wonderful.
you will generally understand his point, and he generally has
A
he
point.
has a good point.
Yeah,
there is a good point in there, but how it is delivered and how he finds it acceptable to talk to other people, that is where the issue is.
Right.
And I think reading his email the other day that came when they adopted the proper code of conduct in the Linux project, I think he has recognized that.
Yeah.
At least recognized that this is a problem.
Yes.
And that is the first step to change.
Sure.
Well, we all know people like that. I've worked with people like that. I've started companies with people like that and left those companies because of people like that. So you must have as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, we all have. But I mean, what do you do about this? I mean, when you're the person who's the target of some of this stuff, I mean, how do you react to it? I mean, if somebody's being totally irrational to you, you can't be irrational back.
And generally there's no good way to deal with it. You need someone else to help you. Because if you are being picked on, which is basically what this is, then you generally have not enough power to deal with the situation. But what you will find in tech, which is interesting as opposed to other spaces, is that the people who have actual social power are not managers.
Right.
They are other people who are respected for their skills.
Right.
So if you can find and someone who is, like I said, like one of these humble, brilliant people who will teach you and you can learn from, then they don't think themselves as powerful. But if they, in a meeting where this is going on, if one of those quiet but respected people says, okay, this is not how we're going to do this,
This isn't working.
then everybody backs off.
I had great mentors when I was younger and learning software. Some that weren't so great, but didn't really have time for me, But my friends who were really smart really took the time and just carefully explained things and quietly, easily, effortlessly, and that was just so great.
Yeah.
I felt very lucky to have mentors like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The challenge, well, maybe we should talk first about why would you be reading someone else's code? Like I suggested that InfoSec scenario of I'm looking for potential security vulnerability. But what are the typical reasons you see that people have to sit around and read code?
Okay, but I've worked as a C++ developer, and we have a very kind of special type of culture, so it's not very applicable, I think, to most other cultures, because we have this idea of understanding everything all the way down to the metal, right?
Right, yeah, it's definitely a philosophy.
It is a philosophy, and it's a culture, and it's very common in that area in C, C++, assembly, low-level programming. They have that kind of view. But if you look at more high-level programming, like if you do JavaScript or Java, or I'm sure .NET, then if you have, you generally use many frameworks with code that you don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And your Happy Day scenario went fine. You have everything up and running, but something happened in production.
Yeah.
Right.
And you don't know what happened. You got this error. You have no idea what it means. And so your first step is, okay, I'm going to Google this error.
Which is remarkably effective.
Yes, and most of the time that will work.
The Google response page that has 3 responses.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're all in different languages. You're just like, oh.
No.
But if you're lucky, you get to one Stack Overflow thing where one answer has like 500 upvotes, and you're like, this is the answer, and 95% of the time this will solve your problem.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the last 5%, then you're like, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Right.
And those 5%, you're like, okay, so maybe I should upgrade my version, maybe I should blah, blah, blah. And then you're just trying stuff, right?
You're just whacking away.
Yes.
Getting against the wall.
Yeah, it's like, and if something works, you're like, okay, nobody touched it, it works now.
Not quite sure why, but it's working.
But it's like, but then you have like one more step where you really need to figure it out. You haven't been able to do any of your normal techniques.
Right.
And that's when you go like, okay, so maybe I should try look at this code.
Right.
And then you're like, okay, so I'm going to clone this thing from GitHub, and now I have suddenly like a directory with a billion subfolders and lots of code, and maybe in a language I don't understand.
And not to interrupt, but isn't it nice that we now live in a world where that's an option?
Oh yeah.
Because once upon a time, that was all a black box.
Yeah.
And all it did was spit out error messages.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, and then you just have to work around it.
And if you have good debugging skills and you can actually load the software in an environment and run through it, you can get very far just by setting breakpoints and finding things.
And actually looking your way through.
Yeah.
But you are looking at somebody else's code.
Yes, you are, and that's a lot what my talk is about, is how you deal with that. Like starting off with like just maybe an exception from a log, something that you're grepping for in this blob of things that you don't know, trying to figure out how things work and trying to figure out what happened. And you do things like, so one of my first step, I have like 10 techniques, but before that I have like before you get started. And one of those is like get the code, get it into version control if it's not in version control, build it, run it, preferably in a debugger.
Yeah.
Get a reproducible problem.
Yes, and then it's like run tests. And a part of the test part is me saying that if you can write an integration test or a system test for this thing, that can exercise exactly the thing you're looking for, where you can just put it in your debugger and just press play instead of like clicking around or doing all sorts of manual things to reproduce. Then you can put in your breakpoints, add lots of logging, read the logs, try to figure out what's going on. It is a semi-structured process, but it's an iterative process, right?
But didn't you also find that exercise often reveals the actual problem? As soon as you take an element like the UI piece out and you're just making the calls directly, all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's not right.
Yeah.
And that might be the thing that turns over your issue.
Yeah. So oftentimes you'll figure out that you were actually doing it wrong, like they say.
Yes.
That you realize you're looking around this code, and this code makes assumptions that you should have done something previously that you didn't do. So now you know, okay, but if I go and do that, then this will work.
Right.
But sometimes you will actually find a real bug, and then you can decide, okay, so I can fix it locally here, or I can try to upstream it, or I can do both. And then you can, but then you end up with like trying to contribute to a project, and then you come down to a lot of these social things that we've talked about, like how to get these people to like you, how to get a working relationship with strangers.
I mean, in the end, I'm about to come to you and say, so you know this thing you made?
Your kid's ugly.
It's got a problem. And you never detected it, but I have. And I think this is the fix for it.
It's very easy to do that in a way that makes people not like you.
Very negative.
Yeah.
It's super easy to go that way.
But if you get a good working relationship with these people, then suddenly, if you have an issue that is really actually not a high priority, but they like you, they might actually fix it just because it's you.
You could say, how would you like me to make your code not suck? That is an anti-pattern of social.
Ask me how I know.
Social anti-pattern number 105.
I also find it frustrating to just to open an issue immediately. It's like, I think there's a problem here, I can't do this. Rather than take this time to do that exploration. You could have quite possibly solved your problem on your own anyway. At least box the problem a little closer.
Anytime one of my guys comes to me and says, hey, I'm having a hard time figuring out X, I always give it an hour or two before I answer. Because usually I get, oh, never mind, I found it.
Got it. Just need to think about it a little longer.
I need to think about it, need to explain it to somebody.
And that is actually technique number 10. My list.
Wow.
It's retelling or rubber ducking. It's actually trying to explain it to somebody else. And usually the process of like serializing all of your thoughts into text and writing it down or saying it to someone is enough that in the middle of it you will go like, actually, never mind. I know exactly what's wrong. And then you just leave. And the person's like, what happened? It's like, sometimes you don't even get there. You're like, you walk into somebody's office and you go like, okay, so I have this thing that I'm really struggling with. And
I gotta go.
okay, no, never mind.
Hey guys, let's hold it right here for just a minute while we take a moment for this very important message. That wasn't for you, live people. That was for .NET Rocks.
Yikes.
And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. That's Richard Campbell. And that is Patricia Aas. We're talking about reading other people's code and, well, some of the pitfalls that you can find yourself in when you're doing that and presenting problems in other people's code.
What about code reviews? Like the sort of conscious effort to have more than one pair of eyes on any given piece of code.
It is one of the problematic areas that we have. Because on the one hand, a lot of people find them to be very valuable.
Yes.
But on the other hand, they are, like I've called them before, they are power structures, and power structures can be used to oppress.
Yes.
And you will often see, you had a study that was done by GitHub where they were looking at pull requests and acceptance of pull requests. And what they found was that women were more likely to get their pull requests accepted than men, as long as nobody knew they were women.
What?
But if I pick it up what you're putting down here,
Unbelievable.
it is that their style of approaching a pull request, how they're explaining what they're doing, what their contribution looked like, is very effective.
As long the code is good, how they're doing it, everything is good. As long as nobody knows they're women, they are really, really successful. The moment they know that people know they are women, they are struggling uphill.
Wow.
Yeah, and that is something that we have to recognize, that these power structures that we make, they are actually oppressing parts of our community.
Well, and they're actually in the head. This has got nothing to do with quality of work. This is the definitive description of prejudice.
Yeah.
It's prejudgment.
But very often people don't do this consciously, right?
Right.
This is something that you do subconsciously.
It is interesting to think in terms of how often you do see a gender-neutral identity in a GitHub account. That it's just like, but that has no gender. It's an avatar and a name.
Yeah.
That doesn't really imply a gender.
Yeah, and that's
live
the
in the
smart
matrix.
way to do it if you want to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what you're doing is minimizing the prejudgment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Better or worse. It would be better if we didn't prejudge.
Yeah, and also that we consider that viewpoints that are different and our own are valuable.
Yes.
And not wrong.
Yeah.
Just because somebody thinks differently than you, they might actually bring something to the table that you don't know about because of your experience.
I've always argued it as you need that little heat to temper the results. That the differences in opinion, the differences in viewpoint create friction. And it's tempting to always go for the frictionless society. We all want to agree, but homogeneity breeds really weakness.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not saying that you should just get along.
Yeah.
But I am saying that you should create teams and social environments where people are not afraid.
Yes.
So if people, you might say something, and if you have, this is most people can recognize. You have, pick two people, one person that you have a very tense relationship with, and then somebody who you're really close to, and both of them tell you you're an idiot. That is a totally different feeling.
Yes.
If you have a really close friend, you know they love you, you know they care about you, and they tell you you're an idiot, that is a totally different thing than somebody who is adversarial and mean to you and telling you you're an idiot.
Right.
And that is a huge difference. And everybody knows this, like in their personal life, but then they forget it.
At work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's strange how that it just sort of falls by the wayside sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I mean, I've worked in so many work cultures. It's interesting I have found places that were fairly bombastic in their sort of Socratic evaluations, but with good intent and at high levels of trust. And it was very challenging for new people to join those groups.
Yeah.
The group itself functioned very well, but then it almost becomes this club that nobody else can penetrate. And at the same time, you can get into situations where everyone is so careful, it's its own constraint, and you can't actually get things done, or nothing gets better.
Or they don't talk to each other, or they just talk amongst themselves, and yeah.
You have to be able to trust people enough that you are confident that even if you say something that is dumb or something that is bad in some way, that you won't get punished for it.
Right.
And maybe it's like if somebody says, like, does anyone have any idea how we can solve this problem? And
Right.
you know that if you throw something out, some person is going to scream, "You're an idiot, that's not possible."
Right.
You are not going to risk that.
Right.
But if you know that you throw something out and people go like, I'm not sure that's going to work.
Right.
They're still speaking their mind.
Right.
Yeah.
They're, but you are not afraid to hear that, because you also know that when they say something, you can say that, and that is safe for you to do.
Yeah.
You're not afraid to say and contribute everything that you have.
There are definitely personalities that are more pessimistic than optimistic. That, you know, there are folks whose natural tendency is to pick holes.
Right.
And I'm not going to say it's necessarily bad. It just needs to be balanced too, right?
But you get what really drives me crazy is when somebody will offer all of the criticism and none of the suggestion, right? So, okay, yeah, I get that. I did that wrong.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Now, what would you like to do about it, right?
And
And they can't answer that. They're still stuck in blame.
And
Right.
and blame is usually non-productive. And
Yep.
actually having a process where assigning blame is a goal will generally prohibit learning.
Sure.
I think people need to know where they screwed up, but move on.
Yeah,
right?
but the thing is, as a
Don't get
group,
stuck.
everyone can learn. Like, very often it's like, okay, so let's say that you were trying to do an upgrade of something, and then suddenly you crash the entire site.
Right.
Right.
So somebody now can like take you to task and say like, oh my God, you're such an idiot for doing this.
You
Or-
stupid fool! What
Yeah.
did you do?
The site's
Or-
still down.
Or people can say like, okay, so but listen, you were just doing a routine upgrade.
Yeah.
Right.
And how did that lead to this? Like, is there something that we can put in that? Maybe our
Right.
documentation needs to be better. Maybe parts of this should be scripted.
What did we
Maybe,
miss?
Yeah, exactly. And then as a group, you are learning.
Well, the
and
argument
it's
is it shouldn't have
blameless.
been possible for you to take that down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that risky to do
Sure.
something that should have been routine.
Yeah.
And a line I've used many times is this: be more careful next time is not a strategy.
Hey, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is now?
It must be that happy time again.
Yep. It's time to deserialize today's humorous thoughts into a nullable joke object.
Nice.
And it's null.
Object not found.
Nope. Sorry.
Or my favorite error message of all time. Sorry.
Sorry. That's the Canadian version. Sorry.
It's like object not found, but it's more polite.
Actually, it's sorry. It's-
I
actually,
contaminated you now.
I know.
Let's catch you.
Every once in a while. It's actually time to give away a $200 Amazon gift card, compliments of Progress Telerik, to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. But first, let me tell you about the most comprehensive developer toolkit for building modern apps on the market today, Telerik DevCraft. With more than 1,100 Telerik.NET and Kendo UI JavaScript components and controls, you can easily build modern, high-performant web, mobile, and desktop apps, as well as chatbots. The toolset also includes reporting solutions, automated testing, and productivity tools, and comes with a range of support options. New this year is a free online training program for all license holders, with this alongside thousands of demos with source code, comprehensive docs, and a full assortment of Visual Studio templates. Did I say studio twice? And a full assortment of Visual Studio templates. You'll be up and running with the Progress, Telerik, and Kendo UI tools in no time. Download a free 30-day trial today at telerik.com/download.
Well, all right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner, Richard, is Jonas Borges.
That's it, Jonas.
Let's give Jonas a round of applause.
No golf claps here.
Yeah, no golf claps.
Claps.
And the reason that I stumbled is because obviously I sat on my phone and put some extra characters in there during the break. It's always funny. And blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway, Jonas just won a $200 Amazon gift card, compliments of Progress Telerik, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you'd like to be a member, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world, In every show, we like to give away stuff from our sponsors, and every December, we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member of that fan club. But you gotta sign up if you want to win. And we also like to ask our guests, Patricia, if you had $5,000 to spend on technology right now, what would you buy?
That is hard. $5,000. It's like the things that I would like are the things that are probably quite useless right now. Like you have, and are much more expensive. You have all of these new screens that are still experimental, that are translucent, and things that are bendable.
Yeah.
So you can roll them.
Yeah.
I'm very interested to see where that goes and to try it and to see like how that could be. But also, okay, so $5,000. Yes, I know what I would buy. One of these virtual reality / augmented reality
Headset systems.
Yeah.
Yes, because
They're
I'm
getting
I'm very interested in seeing where that will go, especially augmented reality and how we will do user interfaces when suddenly we have a 3-dimensional space to do them in.
Yeah, and you have a device on your face, and I'm thinking HoloLens here, that basically is mapping that 3D space.
Yeah.
So it knows where everything is and can help you interact with it.
Especially HoloLens, I think, is very interesting.
Yeah.
Ready Player One. Here we come.
I was thinking hard about things like cooking with a HoloLens on.
Yeah.
Where it was actually, with a little machine learning on the back end, it can see that your sauce is about to break. You need to do this.
That's pretty cool.
It's actually continuously evaluating.
You can
the
have like
process.
infrared camera that will tell you the temperature of the thing you're looking at.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That's
No,
good.
I'm very interested in where that will go.
I have a laser thermometer. It does a pretty good job.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just strap it to your head.
That's right.
Now you're augmented.
What could go wrong? Just don't look at the cat.
You look at your kids and you're like, oh my gosh, you're sick.
Yeah, that's right.
Hot.
And they're like, ow, my eye. Don't look at me.
Yeah, but you look at the food and the cat jumps in the pot. That's not good either. All right, we're a little off track.
Sorry.
We were having such an empathetic conversation.
You know, it's almost Scotch time,
It's
right?
getting that way, yeah.
All
We
right.
probably should have had a whiskey.
Probably.
For the last show of the day.
Let's go over some of the other points in your, your, how many? 10?
10.
Yeah. How many points are there? 10, and let's talk about some more.
Okay. Well, we've talked about some of them already, but I guess one of the things that I want to bring through is that only very small projects you can really learn by starting and just reading it.
Yeah.
Sure.
So a lot of the techniques is about trying to figure out which parts are interesting. So you had the first technique is one that most people do, but most people are ashamed of doing. And it's something I call grepping.
Yeah, I love grepping. There's no shame in grepping.
There's a lot of shame in grepping. People are very ashamed of grepping. But in my experience, like if you are messing around in somebody else's code, at least 20% of your time is just grepping for stuff.
Right.
Sure.
Because you don't know, it's like you're over here and that calls this thing, but you don't know where that ends up. And then you're like...
I got to define grepping because there might be developers who've never heard that term before. But it's basically searching through files, right?
Yeah, text search.
Text search through all your files to find classes, whatever it is that you're looking for.
You think about, one of our advantages living in studio land is I click on any method or I click on any a function and it just will jump to where it's called.
And in my talk, I define that also as grepping.
Yeah.
So any
It is kind of grepping, without a doubt.
Yeah, it is. So that's why I say it's like try to put the code into an IDE and as smart of an IDE as you can afford.
Well,
because that will give you a lot of like extra things and it will make it faster
Right.
to
Find
jump
your way.
around.
Grepping really is, if I've worked on projects with solutions with 150 projects in them, and if you try to search for through all those files in Studio, sorry, it's just not fast.
Studio's not that magical either.
Yeah, but a grep is really, really effective. Why is there shame in grepping?
Because people feel that it's not very structured or like engineering. It's more like, throwing a rock in and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
But the thing is that is a part of the thing. You're in unknown territory.
So wait a
this
minute.
is
So
not-
is it are the engineers mocking us because we don't have a clear idea of what we're doing in mind?
No, the funny thing-
always have the answer before you ask the question.
the funny thing is that all of the engineers do this.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
But
right.
the thing is, we don't tell anybody. It's like, don't look. I'm just grepping in the code here.
Grepping is okay. That needs to be the sign on the wall.
Yeah,
Right.
no, but I think we have lots of things that we are like a little bit ashamed of, but we don't tell people. Like
Yeah.
like I have like my bash of shame, because if I have something that I do a lot, in the beginning it's like I type it, but then I get tired of typing, so I do arrow up to do it, and then I have it in my history. But after a while, it's like I do it a lot, and then sometimes I have to do them in a specific order, so I get tired of that. So I just kind of copy paste them out into a bash file, and then I just have that lying around, and I just run it, and it will do all of the things.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, and after a while, I do that and I have to change it, but then I'm afraid I'm going to break it, and so suddenly at some point I will go like, I need to put this in source control. so I have a folder where I have my script, and so now I can, but it's a local repository because nobody is seeing my bash.
Right.
Nobody's going to look at this.
And then at a certain point, this is becoming like, I've had several scripts. They have like really made my workflow really efficient.
Yeah.
Other people see that I'm really efficient in this workflow, and they go like, you know what? Can I look at your scripts? And I'm like, no.
No.
This is my
Don't
bash
judge
of
me.
shame over here, and you will not touch it. Because it's like, it is basically just copy pasting, and just like I'm not very good at bash. If I have a problem, I Google it.
Right.
And so I don't really feel that it has sufficient quality. The thing is, it has value, right?
Sure.
It has, like,
Enough that
some-
somebody asked for it.
Yeah, so what I do then is I go like, I'll write a Python script to do it. I never actually end up doing that because I start and I realize I'm not that great at Python either. But at least Python I feel like I can give to somebody, whereas my bash is like, it's like my dirty secret. I just hide.
Well, but if you got an intern,
But maybe, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, because
That's
it's like
a good job for an
it has
Learn Python.
Yes, can it learn Python and then
Write my
make this
scripts for
pretty?
Yes.
So I have it at the tip of my fingers when I need it.
That's funny.
Yeah. Scooter.
Next.
What are some of the other items on your list for reading other people's code?
One thing that is if you're looking at a GUI application, then it's trying to understand how the GUI works.
Right.
Oh.
And there are like different techniques for doing that. First one I would go for is find that button. So you basically just find a button that has a string on it. And you grep for the string. So you find the string probably in the localization mapping file if you have an internationalized application, but that will generally map to some kind of constant. So you grep for the constant.
That'll take you to the constant. This is why we grep.
Yes, this is why we grep. And
wrong
grepping
with
again
grepping.
can mean just like like control clicking on things if you
Sure.
have a smart enough ID. But if not, you can do grepping in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's like you end up and so now you have the definition of the button, and then you go like, okay, so now I have to figure out how this hooks up to everything else. So then you try to find like, okay, here's an on-click method.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to put a breakpoint, and now you need to have a debugger, right? And put a breakpoint on the on-click, and then you click on the button. And you're like, okay, so now I have the stack on how all of the events get passed up. I have the widget hierarchy is now live in my debugger. I can navigate up. I can see what kind of objects are in this widget hierarchy. And suddenly you can learn a lot about how the UI is structured. And you have things like that. And then you have also try to make a feature. Like try to add a button next to your button.
Right.
Because that will you think you understand by just looking around, but when you actually have to do, you realize all the stuff you didn't understand.
Yeah. This is really about figuring out what environment you're truly functioning in. What is the patterns they're using about how UI works and so forth.
Because
adding something new is a great test.
Because you have to realize okay, so who instantiates this thing and who owns it, and how do events propagate? I made a new event, but how do I set up somebody to listen for that, and what happens then? And suddenly you are digging into the logic of how to add features, which is usually in any code base a very central thing. They've added features many times, so they generally have a model for how you add features, and so then you learn a lot.
Yeah.
And that informs, again, when you read code, again, that you didn't really understand before. Now you understand more, so you read code you read before, and then suddenly it makes sense in a different way. So that's why I say it's a very iterative process, where you take notes, you draw, you try to explain it to people, set breakpoints, you add logging, add tests, do like, it's a dirty process, but it is for learning, right?
Yeah. And it's learning to get enough under that you have some confidence to be able to understand how it behaves, debug it, make modifications to it.
Yes.
I mean, it's part of this really reminds me of Michael Feathers' whole, legacy code mindset, and just that idea of, legacy is stuff that doesn't have tests.
Yeah.
Like, can you actually build enough tests around it that you have confidence in its behavior?
Yeah, because one of the central things that I talk about way in the beginning of the talk is that when you program yourself, you kind of have what I call like a mental machine. You know how this thing works. You know, if you push here, then this will go here and here, and you have this vision in your head.
An abstraction.
Yeah, and when you program, you kind of have to serialize that into code. But when you get somebody else's code, you just get the code.
Right.
You are missing this whole mental machine. So a lot of this process is trying to construct this mental machine from somebody else's code, and generally you will never get the whole machine. And in big projects today, like things like Chromium or Android, I don't think anyone has the whole machine.
Yeah.
Everyone has like their part of the machine. And sometimes you know like who you talk to, but you don't know anything about the people over here.
You understand the widget's on the right and the widget's on the left. And that's kind of it.
Yeah. And so
I love this idea that you have of serializing thoughts.
Yeah.
Like in the gestures that you're doing here, it's like pulling it out of your head into code. I think that's wonderful.
And that's also sort of what you have to do when you explain things to people, because it's abstract in your head. You think you got it, but when you actually have to formulate sentences and logical arguments and structures, then suddenly you see what you're missing, and you're seeing what doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's why it's always helpful to teach or to explain anything that you're doing, like rubber ducking. Even if it's to your rubber duck, you explain things, you figure them out, you see the problems.
But you're also reminding me that this idea that all things are created twice.
Yeah.
The model in your mind, and then the model that you represent through your fingers or that you represent through your voice. Yeah. Like it has to be twice.
Yeah.
And that process of transferring from one to the other is also a source of learning and a source of finding problems.
And often you will need to have it reflected back in some way. That it's like, okay, so we have this thing in our head, we try to put it into code, then we try to compile it, we try to run it, we try to accomplish the task, right? And that is the validation that both that our mental model worked and also that our translation process worked, to figure out if it works. And when you talk to someone, you take your thoughts and you serialize them into words and you say them to them, but they can reflect back to you that they understood you.
Right.
Because just because you said something doesn't mean that the other person understood what you were saying.
Sure.
You don't get that with the rubber duck.
No.
You might get a little...
But it's hard to be motivated to talk to a rubber duck. So I actually say that I don't recommend talking to it. And also because if you're in an open plan office, people will look at you funny if you're like sitting there talking to a rubber duck.
So really what we need, and this might be fun, is an Alexa skill or a Siri app or something that just listens to you explain your code and goes, I get it. Wow.
But the thing
is, are you sure that's the way it should go? Randomly. And then just maybe that will help you figure stuff out.
But it has to be motivating enough that you bother.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so having a person, you kind of feel like you have to make an effort. You can't just go in there blabbering. You kind of have to try.
Yeah.
If you try to write a blog post or prepare an internal presentation or write some documentation, all of these things are things where you have to make an effort and where other people might hear or read you, right?
Right.
And so you will actually do the effort and not just go like blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Because it's very easy to kind of not go through with it.
Right. And explaining things that you assume, because we always, you start a project with a bunch of assumptions, but you never really include those assumptions in your documentation. Always, not always, but.
And that's when it's great if people can ask questions. Like it's like we have the rubber ducking thing where you're not really requiring the other person to understand much.
I saw a scrubbed version of a movie, and Samuel Jackson said, I am tired of these rubber ducking snakes on this rubber ducking plane.
Somebody asks you to evaluate their code. I think it's a challenge to actually, and I would love your thoughts on how how to criticize effectively?
Someone asked me after the talk downstairs a similar question, and I think there are two aspects to it. First of all, it is hard to especially if you have like a code review where you're kind of getting a diff.
Yep.
So imagine that somebody is making a change in your code, code that you know, that you have this mental machine
The model for.
Yeah.
then if you see the diff, you can generally map that to that specific part. You can actually apply it mentally,
Right.
and then you can see, okay, but that doesn't really work because of this thing, and you're not taking into consideration this other thing.
Right.
But what you are doing then is the valuable feedback. You're doing the functional, logical feedback. Whereas if you are evaluating someone's code that you don't have that mental model, it often degenerates to style.
Yeah. The worst kind of code review.
Yeah, and
what? Spaces, not tabs?
Yeah, and first of all, it's generally functionally uninteresting. It generally doesn't give any value, and it feels like somebody's picking on you for no reason.
Right.
For no good use.
Yeah. So if you want to be able to do the middle part, then you basically have to try to build this mental machine out of this code that you don't know, which takes effort.
Yeah.
And time.
And time, and you might not feel like you have that because you're in the middle of this other thing, and you're just and so it becomes you end up like, okay, well, I'll just comment on their braces, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think probably I think we overvalue some of the feedback that we get, and we undervalue the real feedback. So what you want is basically someone who is working in this part of the code to give you feedback.
Sure.
Because they will give you the real feedback, what that you really need. They have the model, and they can explain it to you. They can tell you why this doesn't work. They can point you in the right direction. They can teach you right.
Yeah.
How do you feel about stuff like pair programming? Like one of the things we just saw that is like you naturally both have the mental model.
Yeah.
And you always have a duck sitting right beside you.
For some people, they love it.
Yeah.
They need it. For me, I'm naturally an introvert. I can't imagine working that way.
Having someone beside you.
Yeah, I have tried it several times, but for me, it is exhausting.
Sure.
Yeah, so I need time and quiet to build my machine.
Yeah.
And if someone talks to me constantly, or I have to talk to them constantly, it just kind of collapses.
Sure. No, and I'm a firm believer in, my productivity is measured in interruptions per hour. And the correct number of interruptions per hour is like 0.25.
Yeah.
But it's funny, they've done studies where if you are deeply immersed in a task where you have to have full concentration and somebody interrupts you, it will take around, on average, 20 minutes to get back where you were.
Sure.
So somebody comes over to you and they say, do you have a minute? What they're actually asking, do you have 21 minutes?
Well, you've already taken 21 minutes now.
Yeah.
So it's funny how people, especially people who don't have those kinds of jobs, don't realize that it takes a lot to get back where you were.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things if we are going to get to a pair situation where they have to understand the concentration model.
Yeah,
and know how to contribute to each other.
And
are there things people do to try to get in and out of that model, or maybe make the models not so complex that they have to keep it all in their head at one time?
That is a theory that several people have said, that if you have to spend so much time constructing it, it's too complex.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that is a very interesting point of view. I don't know if it applies always, but I think it should apply a lot of the time. Most things should be simple to understand. We like to make things like, oh, I made all of this like fancy stuff, but it comes back to like things like we've talked about in the past, like things like premature optimization. If you make code that is like ridiculously complex, trying to shave off a couple of milliseconds off of something that happens only once, then it's going to be really difficult for the next person to make a change here.
Yeah, right.
And that is also the thing, though. When you program, people think that you're programming a computer, but when you program, very much you are writing to the next person, the next person that's going to read this.
Yeah.
We are, like in many ways, like people who write books. We write code, but we are communicating with people.
Yep.
And thinking that way, and oftentimes it's not easy to tell where things that you thought were obvious weren't obvious. And so that's when it's really good to have maybe a junior person to come and read your code as a senior person, where they go like, I don't understand what you did here. And then you realize, okay, that wasn't as obvious as I thought it was.
Sure. And teaching someone, that piece of complexity is useful for them and useful for you.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the best way to think about how I would make that simpler.
Yeah, exactly. And that is often where you are as a senior. You're trying to figure out better ways of explaining things, better ways of expressing things. When you're a junior, you're spending most of your time trying to understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's where seniors really need juniors to give them that fresher perspective.
Stop them from getting so lost in their heads, essentially, of weirder and weirder
because
ideas.
it could easily spin out of control, where you are the only one that understands this thing now. And the whole team recognizes that nobody will make a change here, and if you go on vacation, nobody will touch it.
Code freezes. You get hit by a bus, and then it's like, here's this magic code. We don't touch this magic
No,
code.
in the end, it's like your team will probably just try to make a whole new module to replace yours.
Yes.
Instead of working with your code.
Right.
Trying to work with anything.
Yeah.
I think it's the best measure of quality code is that other people can pick it up and run with it and do more with it.
Sure. And even fix it if it
Yeah.
needs fixing.
I do think it's a challenge to measure that, to say what is code that's easy to maintain by others.
Do you think C++ is inherently more abstract and complex to construct mental models of code than, say, some of the higher level languages? Because
I think C++ and C as well are languages that are fraught with danger.
yeah,
And so we are very careful programmers.
it's your foot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I heard a podcast with a guy who makes this CPP quiz this other day, and he's written all of these like questions, and he has a deep understanding. And then the podcast people were asking him like, so what have you learned after doing this for so long? And he was like, I have learned to be very afraid.
You will be.
I know enough to know I'm doomed.
Yes. Or like somebody else said on Twitter, says, I know enough about floating points to know that I don't know anything about floating points.
Wow.
I appreciate that. It's great thinking, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what's next for you, Patricia?
I just started my own company.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Or
Thank
maybe
you.
maybe that's premature.
It might be. I
Good
don't
luck,
know.
maybe.
No, the funny thing is I had already decided that I was going to spend some months this fall learning more about security, trying to figure out how I want to contribute. So I basically have like a study break where I will learn and study and make stuff, and I kind of we've saved up to do that, and so that is like, so I'm on a study break until December 1st. So when people ask me, so how is it like working for yourself? And I'm like, you know what, it's totally unrealistic. I basically do exactly what I want to do every day. This is not how it's going to be. So I can't tell you.
Yeah, you don't know yet. You don't have one boss. Every customer is now the boss.
So currently I do stuff that I find interesting. I make stuff that I find interesting. I want to dig into. But December 1st, that's when I have to get a real job.
Right, start getting paid for it.
Yes, I have to get paid. So we'll see how that goes.
What's the company and the website?
The company is called TurtleSec, and the website is turtlesec.no.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Well, we definitely have to talk to you some more in the future, I'm sure. Will you come back?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Patricia Aas, it's been great talking to you. And we will see you next time on .NET Rocks.